Hello, everyone, and welcome back for day 3 of our seminar. My name is Christine Applewhite. I am the newest retail food specialist here at FDA, and I will be your moderator for today's sessions. We hope you enjoyed the breakout sessions yesterday. All of the presentations were so informative and very well received, and it was really great to see the interaction in the chat threads during the presentations. If there was a session that you were not able to attend on day 1 or in any of the breakout sessions, please keep in mind that they have been recorded so you can go back and view them at your leisure on the site. Just return to the session card and you should see the recording available on the page. In addition, we had many questions about how to access the PDF versions of the PowerPoints. These can be found in the Files tab of the session card, located just to the right of the chat box for the general session presentations, or at the bottom of each breakout page under the Document Download section. Please keep in mind that these PDF versions are only available if speakers have given the permission to share their presentations with attendees. One last order of business. Please don't forget to complete the feedback survey for each session card that you attend. Your feedback is vital to planning next year's seminar, and we definitely want to hear from you. We read each and every evaluation, so please take the time to provide your input. We have a great day of presentations ahead, so let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to hand it over once again to our Director of Retail Food Protection Division, Andre Pierce. Andre, if you could unmute, please, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, and we see you.
Great. Good afternoon and welcome to the final day of the 2022 FDA Retail Food Protection Seminar. I love the energy here. I know you do. Fantastic breakout sessions yesterday. Last night I was on the Pacific region and I think there were over 400 people still there at 6:30 Eastern. So just a lot of good energy, and we really do appreciate you participating. The information and the expertise that's been shared here has just been phenomenal. But it's always great to be around others who are passionate about this work. You guys are the champions of food safety, and the relationships like those made at seminar really make all the difference. I have really fond memories of the seminars that I've attended. Our seminar opened with some wonderful research from CDC that connects food code provisions to the reduction in the magnitude of norovirus outbreaks. The great thing about that is that research validates that our interventions do make an impact. You make a difference with your influence in the retail kitchens around the country, and the data prove it. We are better together than we are alone. To that end, I'm excited to share some news with you about collaboration between CDC and FDA. At 9:30 this morning at the FDA headquarters in Silver Spring, Maryland, the FDA and CDC officially entered a memorandum of understanding to formalize our partnership to reduce foodborne illness risk factors at retail. This is all about retail. The MOU is a first of its kind, and we're excited about the projects that will support all of our food safety outreach and regulatory work. Outcomes will support the types of research we've heard about this week, making the link between what you're doing and its impact, such as the value of food safety management systems and risk-based inspections. They all have a connection, and it's amazing that we have this expertise tied to that. The MOU, without going into all the details, basically has 3 goals, and they're aligned with all of our goals: increasing uniformity, consistency of our inspection, regulatory approach, promoting active managerial control, and then, of course, maintaining a strong workforce. Now, about this afternoon's sessions, I'm not going to talk too long in this opening because I know we're ready to get started. But first, we're looking forward to hearing this afternoon from Michael Freeman on successful communication strategies that negotiate challenging conversations, even de-escalate some of those, to get voluntary compliance. I'm sure we've had situations in kitchens that we can use these resources. So we're looking forward to his presentation and how we can take this back to our regulatory approach. Then we have a salmonella outbreak session where we're going to learn about how multiple disciplinary collaboration really supported pieces of solving the outbreak, and how a cultural navigation program was formed out of that. And finally, our own Christine Applewhite, our newest retail food specialist, will talk to us about how to assess employee health during routine inspections and utilizing the resources available in the annexes when a food service worker is sick. And I just had the privilege just a little bit ago to see some of the, to get a sneak preview at some of the presentations. It's going to be really good. So let's get started. Christine?
Okay, thank you, Andre, for your opening comments this morning. Definitely excited about this afternoon's presentations. So we're going to move right along to our first presentation, and here with us is Mr. Michael Freeman of the Verbal Judo Institute. Michael Freeman works for the Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality and is an associate instructor for the Verbal Judo Institute. Mr. Freeman graduated from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in 1993 with a bachelor's degree in psychology and was hired by the Department of Environmental Quality in September of 1994 as a regulatory inspector in the hazardous waste program. He helped build the agency's criminal investigation program a few years thereafter and became its first commissioned law enforcement officer. He spent almost 24 years in that position before transferring to the Land Protection Division in 2022. Mr. Freeman, if you could please unmute yourself, turn your camera on, and share your screen. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on your time zone. It's good to be here. Appreciate the invitation to come speak. I will share my screen here and we'll get started with the slides. All right, I am an instructor for the Verbal Judo Institute. That's kind of a side gig that I've developed over the years. I do still work for the Department of Environmental Quality, currently in a regulatory position. I first came across Verbal Judo and the Verbal Judo program at an environmental conference in Boise, Idaho back in 2006. And Dr. Thompson, who developed the course, was giving an abbreviated version of the class. And I saw how useful it would be not only for law enforcement officers, which is the group it was originally developed for, but also for anyone that deals with the public on a day-to-day basis. Because the verbal skills that law enforcement officers use are really the same verbal skills that are available to any of us, as we'll see here in the next 45 minutes or so. So following that conference, I talked to Dr. Thompson and I got certified as an instructor. And I took the information and I tweaked it a little bit and removed some of the stuff that was heavily law enforcement flavored and replaced it with some information that's more applicable to what regulatory inspectors deal with on a routine basis. And I've been teaching the course ever since. 2 weeks ago was my 142nd course that I've taught in 32 states and 2 Canadian provinces. Very, very successful program because it's so practical and it deals with what we experience on a day-to-day basis from a law enforcement side as well as a regulatory side. We deal with difficult people. Y'all as food inspectors, when you go into a business, you are not always welcomed, right? Just regulatory inspectors in general are not always the bearer of good news, and that creates conflict. And the Verbal Judo program can really be broken down into 2 areas. De-escalation, we take volatile emotional situations and de-escalate those. And then persuasion. Our goal is to generate voluntary compliance. From the food safety program perspective, you all want folks to comply with the food safety regulations. That protects public health. But compliance sometimes costs, right? It costs money, costs time, may be inconvenient for folks, and there's resistance there that builds up, and that resistance can increase to the point where there's a verbal attack of some sort, a verbal assault that we have to de-escalate. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. I've taken probably a 3-hour block and condensed it down into about 45 minutes. So there are going to be some extra slides in the presentation that we're not going to actually cover, but I left them in there specifically so you would have that information available to you when you get copies of the slides. And at the end of the session today, we'll have a question and answer session. I'll try to answer as many questions as I can. If I don't get to them all, I will try to review the chat and answer those questions in the chat box later today. All right. So the mission of the Verbal Judo Institute is to create a safer world by delivering practical and easy to learn strategies which empower people to effectively de-escalate conflict and potential violence. The word violence there is important because these verbal conflicts that we encounter from time to time do sometimes escalate to violence. If you want a extreme example of that, look up the Sausage King case in San Leandro, California, back in, I believe, the year 2000. 3 food safety inspectors were actually murdered by the owner of the business because he felt backed into a corner. And there were some mental health issues going on too, but he felt he was losing everything, had nothing to lose, and ended up murdering 3 food safety inspectors. So if you're interested in a real life situation involving verbal and physical assaults, take a look at that sometime. Verbal judo is basically redirecting behavior using words. Word judo comes from Japanese ju meaning gentle, do meaning way. It's a gentle way, gentle path. It's a softer martial art. Physical judo redirects physical energy, whereas verbal judo, redirecting verbal energy to accomplish our purpose. So it's redirection rather than resistance. Goals of the course, we're going to cover this really in detail. You can look at those at your leisure, but personal safety, I'll just point out, is number one goal of the course, hands down. And ultimately, number 8, there, improve outcomes. We want folks to comply. And in order to do that, sometimes we have to de-escalate. We have to face these verbal attacks and successfully navigate those in order to generate voluntary compliance. I would like compliance. I'll settle for that, but if I can get collaboration, that's even better, and even cooperation, then that's a really good day. 5 principles that Dr. Thompson really built this program around. Number 1, all people want to be treated with dignity and respect. It doesn't matter your socioeconomic status, your gender, race, religion, political viewpoints, whatever. Everyone wants to be treated with dignity and respect, and that's what this overall program does. All people want to be asked rather than told to do things. For our purposes, there's really 2 main reasons people get really angry with us. They feel loss of control. They feel backed into a corner in some fashion, or they feel like they're not being heard. Those two things. So if you can ask someone rather than tell someone to do something, that gives them the feeling that they have some measure of control there that alleviates some of that tendency to get angry. All people want to be told why they're being asked to do something. Just the mere effort going into explaining why reduces conflict, shows respect. Do we owe people an explanation? Not from a practical standpoint, possibly, but certainly, or not from a legal standpoint, possibly, but from a practical standpoint, yes, because that de-escalates, that builds that rapport and shows respect that breaks down barriers. All people want to be given options rather than threats. That kind of goes back with number 2. As regulatory folks, we are very familiar with the penalties involved in non-compliance. So it can be very easy for us to come across in a threatening manner, giving threats instead of giving options. And when people make a mistake, all people want a second chance. We all do dumb things all the time. Every one of us do. And we want a second chance when that happens. We need to afford that to others. This is kind of what the Verbal Judo program is built upon. So what we're going to talk about now, and spend most of our time talking about, is the anatomy of a verbal attack. You may never have thought about what a verbal attack really looks like. All of us have experienced them. Generally, we'd have to say that they're not fun. We don't enjoy them because it's stressful. It's personal. Sometimes we don't know how to handle those things. We get hours and hours of training in food safety, different ways that we do our jobs. But if you think about it, most of us don't get much, if any, training in verbal techniques, communication skills. And if you think about it, that's the essence of our job, is communication, gathering information, communicating that either in written or verbal form to others, whether it be our supervisors, whether it be the regulated entity that we're dealing with, or even maybe a court in some fashion. So we're going to break down a verbal attack. Let me give you a practical example why we do this. Several years back, my two kids were both competing in Taekwondo through the Oklahoma Karate Association. And my daughter especially was just really into it. And she did this 3 years in a row. And every year she placed at the state level in katas, which are we call forms, and in sparring. But the second year that she was competing, there was a girl that kept beating her every single tournament. And it really frustrated my daughter. So what we did was we took a video of one of the sparring matches, and we came home and analyzed that video almost frame by frame. We looked for, how's this girl shifting her body weight when she's getting ready to attack? When she does attack, where's she open? Where's opportunities for you to counterattack? And we basically broke down the physical attack into its elements, analyzed it. My daughter went back the next tournament and beat her. And the next tournament and the next. And in fact, never lost to that girl again because we analyzed the details of the attack. We're going to do the same thing right now with a verbal attack. Look at its components, see what it looks like, see where it's weak, and see where we can counter said verbal attack. So each one of us have two faces that we present to other people. If you think about it, on one side we have a professional face. On the other side we have personal face. Now think about a verbal attack that you've experienced. If someone attacks us on professional side, those words don't have a whole lot of power. Maybe a little bit, but not a whole lot of power on the professional side. On the other hand, if someone attacks us on our personal side, those words have a whole lot of power over us and a whole lot of influence and really do affect us strongly. So on the professional side, you have the power. You determine how much power those words have over you, which again is usually very little. But if you allow verbal attack to get over onto the personal side, now the attacker has the power. That person who is verbally attacking you has control. So obviously we want to keep things on the right side, on the professional side. Unfortunately for us, there is a bridge that allows someone to cross from the professional side to the personal side. And that bridge is a three-letter word called ego. So ego allows what would have been a professional attack to cross over and become a personal attack. Problem with ego is everyone has one, right? Some are bigger than others. The bigger your ego, the bigger your target, because the weak spot in this paradigm that we're seeing right here is the ego. So the goal of any verbal attack, whether the attacker knows it or not, the goal of that verbal attack is to successfully attack your ego in order to get to your personal face. Now, generally, when someone does successfully get to your personal face, it's very obvious because your facial expressions change, your body language changes. You may attack back. You may get angry, visibly upset, and as I said, counterattack sometimes. So it's usually very obvious when that happens. So that's, again, the ego is the weak spot. We want to keep these verbal attacks from successfully attacking the ego. Now, before we get into talking about a couple ways to do that, let's talk about the various ways that someone might attack our ego. And there are basically 14 different areas. Now, I've got these divided into 14 categories. There is nothing special about the number 14. You could come up with more or less than 14 depending on how you categorize these, more than likely. But I've got them in 14 comprehensive categories. You can think of them as 14 ways someone might attack your ego, or 14 areas of your ego that can be attacked. Either way, it is a good way to look at that. So the first, gender. Gender along with anything related to sexuality. So someone might attack female inspectors, for example. I've probably all experienced this in some fashion. It may be an overt attack of some sort, verbally, of course, or it might just be the use of terms such as honey or sweetie or missy, something like that, that are spoken in a demeaning fashion. And that is a verbal attack, again, intended to assault your ego, to get to your personal face. And again, you could throw in anything related to sexuality or a sexual orientation, anything like that would fall under that category as well. Second area of attack might be race, attacking someone based on their race. That could be an overt attack using racial slurs or racial epithets, things like that. Or it could be a more subtle attack referring to various racial stereotypes and things like that that are, again, intended to verbally attack you. Physical appearance. This could be anything related to your physical appearance: height, weight, hair color, length of hair, lack of hair, anything like that, especially if it's an area of your physical appearance that you're not very comfortable with. That's a prime area for attack. It could be a physical disability that's manifested visually in some fashion. That would be an area of attack. Age. This could go two ways. It could go, they could attack because of your advanced age or because of your youth. So, for example, you walk into a business to do an inspection. The person says, "Oh, they let high schoolers do your job now?" Okay, attacking your youth. Or alternatively, "Man, at your age, you ought to be greeting at Walmart, shouldn't you?" Something like that. So again, it can go either way. Religion. Religion is one I didn't used to have as a separate category, but I think in today's society, we really have to include that as a possibility for a verbal attack. And that could be based on someone's perception of your religion, based on whether it be religious symbols or something that you have in, like, jewelry, anything like that. Whoops, I got a duplicate there. I forgot where that came from. Just noticed that. Politics. I don't have to explain this very much. This could be a wide variety of things. It could be based on where you are on the political spectrum, conservative versus liberal. And really, remember, it's their perception of where you are, because that's what they're operating from. Most of the time when we go in to do an inspection somewhere, these folks don't know us personally. So what they're operating from is their perception of who we are in all these 14 different areas. So again, politics could be their perception of whether you're conservative or liberal. It could be based on their perception of who you might have voted for the last election, anything like that. 8, education or educational level. So, for example, if I go in to do an inspection at a chemical plant of some sort, and person says, "You know, I've got a PhD in chemistry, and you're trying to come in here and tell me how to run my plant." What are they doing? They're elevating their educational position, emphasizing their educational position with an intent to diminish mine. That could be a verbal attack. Could be an attack on where you went to school. "Oh, you just went to one of those state schools. Well, I've got an Ivy League degree. I can tell you that you're just flat out wrong." Okay, so anything related to education would fall in this category. Financial issues or money. Maybe you're walking into a high-end restaurant to do an inspection, and or a high-end restaurant, or a major food manufacturing or processing facility of some sort. And the owner says, well, I made $15 million last year. You're trying to tell me how to run my plant or run my business. Or conversely, it could say something like, you high-paid government inspectors coming in here trying to pick on the little guy. You don't know what it's like to make payroll and run a business. You don't know how hard it is on us. So it could go either way. Interestingly, if you think about it, I'll insert this here. Each one of these 14 areas is really, what they're really attacking is the areas in which we differ from each other. And if you think about it in the context of a verbal attack, that makes sense, because the person is putting you into a group based on their perception, and they're not going to attack their own group, right? So they're putting you into a group separate from them, and then attacking you based on your membership in that group, which they, by the way, have assigned, right? Position. Okay, this could be position in society, your socioeconomic status, could be position in an organization. From environmental side of things, we get this a lot. People call us tree huggers. You're just a tree hugger. They're attacking your position, as well as probably attacking their perception of your politics, maybe. So it could be position in society or in an organization. And here's another one that y'all have probably experienced. Have you ever walked into a business of some sort and the person says, well, I know Senator so-and-so, or I know the mayor, or I know the governor, right? They're name dropping. What are they doing? Well, they're elevating their position with the intent of diminishing yours, right? So that would be an area of verbal attack. Experience or competence, attacking your experience or competence. Well, I can see you haven't been doing this job very long. Okay, they're attacking your experience and competence. Intelligence. An attack on intelligence might be simply just saying, well, you're just stupid. Okay, it could be an overt statement like that, or it could be more subtle. For example, someone says, well, let me finish because you don't seem to understand. So what is the implication in that statement? Well, the implication is you're too stupid to understand. Okay. And notice there is some overlap between these 14 areas. There's some overlap, for example, between education and intelligence, possibly. There's experience and education. There's some overlap there, and there'll be some more overlap with some of the other two we're going to mention here. Ethics, values, attacking your ethics or values. You lump a whole lot of different things into this category, but and there is some overlap here. Values, for example, politics, or even position. The example I gave a few minutes ago, someone says, "Well, you're just a tree hugger." Or they're attacking values right there. If someone accuses you of, let's say someone accuses you of bias of some sort, or they accuse you of, well, you're just here to collect money for the government. You're just a tax collector. They're attacking position, yes, but they're also attacking ethics and values right there. And 14 is attack on family. Now, this could be an attack on your family structure. For example, whether you're single or married, whether you have kids or don't have kids. In certain parts of the country, that's actually, like verbal attacks can actually take that form. Or it might be one of the other 13 areas that's directed against a member of your family. So that would be an area of attack. Now let me glance over these real quick and see which one I've missed. I duplicated race there. Shoes. Oh, the other one is the use of profanity. The use of profanity. And the use of profanity, oftentimes, I mean, it can, oftentimes what it does is it starts to magnify one of these other 13. And kind of just emphasize the nastiness of the verbal attack, we might say. So basically, any verbal attack takes this form right here. You have 14 areas that are used to attack the ego, again, with the attempt to get to personal face. Now, let's think of an example here. Kind of a silly example. Let's say that instead of meeting virtually, that we are all in person here. We're all in a big conference room or conference hall of some sort. And let's say that we're getting ready to break for lunch. And I tell you that on the way in to the conference this morning, there was some construction going on outside. And I observed a guy sitting on the curb. He was wearing a white hard hat, coveralls. He had an orange safety vest on, and across the chest on his vest had the name Pete on the vest. So I tell you that I was watching Pete, and when people would walk by, he would stand up and he would ask them what time it is. And if that person would look down at their phone or look down at their watch, Pete would take his fist and punch him right in the nose. And I observed this 3 or 4 times. All right, so I'm telling you this. So we break for lunch and you walk outside and there's a guy sitting on the curb. He's wearing a white hard hat, orange safety vest, coveralls. And as you approach even closer, you see that his vest says Pete across the chest. As you begin to walk by him, he stands up and he asks you what time it is. Now, I would venture to say that there's no one who's listening to me right now who would actually look down at their phone or look down at their watch at that point. Why is that? Because I've told you what Pete looks like. I've told you what he's going to do. I've told you his intent, and I've told you his goal. Right? So no one's going to look down at their watch or look down at their phone. So let me ask you this. The next time someone tries to attack your ego with an attempt to get to your personal face using one of these 14 areas, are you going to fall for it? Are you going to get angry and let them have the power? Because I've just told you what a verbal attack looks like. I've told you the intent or the method involved in the verbal attack, or attacking your ego, and I've told you the goal of verbal attack, that's to get to your personal face. So are you going to fall for it? Now, we tend to react instead of respond. So we might still fall for it, but just being able to recognize the verbal attack takes away much of its power, because now we've recognized it. We're now thinking with the cognitive part of our brain, not the emotional part of our brain. And if I can think about a verbal attack with the cognitive part of my brain, I can respond tactically. I can respond with professional language instead of responding out of anger and getting defensive and going down that path. And that just tends to escalate things. Because there's two ways to respond to or two ways to defeat a verbal attack, if you will. Remember we said the ego is the key point right here, the target, if you will. It's the weak spot in this paradigm. So the first thing we want to do is shield that ego. And this is something we do through a concept called showtime. Showtime was a concept that Dr. Thompson taught to law enforcement officers decades ago. And the concept was this: when an officer would get out of his or her vehicle to answer a call, that officer would say to himself or herself, "It's showtime." thus putting that officer in the mindset, this is not personal. I'm just an actor or an actress on a stage. This is my professional role. My ego is not even anywhere involved. I do that. I've done that for years and years and years on the law enforcement side, as well as now back on the regulatory side. When I walk into a facility or I go to interview someone or talk to someone, I literally do still remind myself it's showtime. Because if my ego is not present, there's nothing for that person to attack. If my ego is not present, there's nothing for that person to attack. When I show up, it's Investigator Freeman or Inspector Freeman. Michael Freeman's not there. They can't attack my personal faith because it's not there. I'm showing up with professional face and professional face only. If you feel yourself getting angry, that's the key that should tell you that ego has shown itself. You've allowed ego to get involved, and you're not remembering that it's showtime. This is such a foundational concept. I can't even tell you how important that is. You can just master the idea of seeing yourself in just a professional role and keeping ego out of it. I was 3 or 4 years ago, I was flying somewhere to teach a class. I don't even remember where it was now, but the person on the plane next to me we started chatting, and she asked me where I was headed and why. And I told her, and she was intrigued by the whole verbal judo concept. And she asked me, she said, if you had 10 seconds to explain one concept out of verbal judo, what would it be? And I told her showtime. Maintaining the professional face, keeping ego away, and keeping the verbal attacks away from personal face. It does take some practice, but very, very powerful. The other way that we can protect our ego is to use deflectors. Deflectors are deflectors are phrases, verbal phrases that we use to defeat the power of the verbal attack. So basically, instead of getting to our ego, the verbal attacks are just rejected. And we'll give you some examples. Here are some a few examples. I go into much more detail in a full class. The one I commonly use is the first one there, appreciate it. Someone tells me, well, in fact, we sometimes pair these up with a couple other deflection forms, such as humor. So let's say I go into a facility and the person is upset upon my arrival. It's a bad time. And they're just telling me what a dirty lowlife I am and giving me, a verbal attack loaded with profanity and everything. I say, I appreciate that, but the reason I'm here this morning, it's time to do your inspection. Let's go and get that over with quickly, can we? That's a manner of redirecting it. In terms of using the humor, the person might, again, launch a verbal attack against me and have all these negative, nasty things to say. My wife said that about me this very morning. What I use that deflector just to completely deflect the verbal attack, so it never even makes it to my ego. Because if we use natural language is disastrous. Natural language are those words that naturally flow from your lips when you're angry or upset. Natural language is all the profanity, all the personal insults that you would like to speak back to that other person. Natural language are all those words that you wish you could take back 20 minutes later. How many of you have said something out of anger that 20 minutes later you wish you hadn't said? Well, why'd you say it? If later you're going to take it back. Well, practically speaking, the logical part of our brain is not functioning when we're angry. When we're angry, we're operating from the midbrain, that emotional center of our brain, and we don't think logically. That's why verbal judo is so important, because it allows us to think cognitively about these things and respond with tactical language instead of responding with natural language, which will get us into trouble, which will definitely get us into trouble. Communication, again, don't have a whole lot of time to go into this in great detail. I usually spend about an hour and a half on this in a full class. But communication consists of 3 components: content, voice, and nonverbals. And content is only about 7 to 10% of what is communicated. That's the actual words that are spoken. Voice, on the other hand, is 33 to 40%. And other nonverbals, 50 to 60% of what is said. So what this tells us is up to 93% of our effectiveness lies in our delivery style. When I said a few minutes ago that you're an actor or an actress on a stage playing a role, that's exactly true. And actors and actresses learn how to, they don't only learn their words, their script, right? But they learn how to deliver that with the right voice. They learn proper body language to deliver their lines. We really have to do the same thing, because you can deliver the right words with the wrong voice and wrong body language, and it will backfire. On the other hand, you can deliver maybe bad news to someone with a positive voice and body language, and it can be received in a positive fashion. Tone of voice is really our verbal attitude. As an actor on a stage, your contact, the person you're interacting with, sees you in the role that they want you to play. Remember, I said a few minutes ago that they're operating based on their perception, and they want you to play the role of bad guy. They want you to play the role of combatant, actually. And it's our job to reject that role and play the role that we've chosen, which is the role of professional. We have to do that in a way that most effectively generates voluntary compliance. Always remember that you're an actor or an actress, and keep that in the forefront of your mind. That'll eliminate some of the success of some of these verbal attacks. So tone of voice is attitude. I'll give you an example. I think of tone of voice sometimes as the unspoken word at the end of your sentence. The unspoken word at the end of your sentence. Give you an example. Let's say that we're in a physical conference, okay, and we're out mingling in the foyer on break, and someone comes up to you and they say, "Hey, can you tell me where the restrooms are?" And your response is, "Yeah, they're right over here." What was the unspoken word at the end of that sentence? Dummy, idiot, something like that, right? And it was heard without being spoken. It was heard without being spoken because of my tone. Here's a good rule of thumb. If the unspoken word at the end of your sentence is anything other than sir or ma'am, you failed. If the unspoken word at the end of your sentence is anything other than sir or ma'am, you have failed, because they will hear it, even if it's subconsciously. Here's the thing about communication. We hear the words audibly, but a lot of the tone and the body language is interpreted subconsciously, maybe up to 90% of it sometimes. So they may not immediately respond to your negative body language, negative tone, but that's going to be implanted in their subconscious, and that's going to affect their perception of you. And again, they're operating from that perception. Doesn't matter who you really are. Doesn't matter how professional, how caring, how conscientious, how any of those things. None of those matter, because they're operating from their perception of you. And much of that perception is gleaned from body language and tone. There's some other components to voice as well. We really don't have time to get into. One of the things we focus on in the verbal judo class is the 5-step kata. Once we've de-escalated, it's the means to generate voluntary compliance. I spend about an hour discussing this in a full class, and then we spend about 2.5 hours practicing this. So we don't have time to get it into great detail, but I'll run through it really quickly. Basically, the first step, you want to generate voluntary compliance, you ask. We don't command. Commanding shows personal face. Asking shows professional face. Sir, could I ask you to give me 15 minutes of your time to do an inspection this morning? If you get resistance, you move on to the next step, setting context. This is explaining why. Let's say the person says, "Well, I just don't have time for this right now." Well, sort of explain why I'm asking. You have a permit here that authorizes us to come in and do inspections. And the reason for that, sir, is to make sure that public health is protected, that your food is safe for folks to consume. You can understand that, right, sir? Well, maybe you get rejection there. You move on to the next step, present options. This is where you give the person the illusion of control. Not that they have control, because if you're doing this successfully, you maintain verbal control the entire time. But presenting options, well, sir, we have some great options. If we can get this inspection done quickly right now, I'll be out of your hair. You don't have to worry about me anymore. You get back to making money here and serving your customers. On the other hand, if we can't, then that's going to be a violation, and the agency may even go to the point of pulling your permit, and that won't allow you to sell food at all. And you don't want any of that. So let's go ahead and get this taken care of now. Let's assume we don't get compliance there. That might take us to the next step, which is confirm. Sir, is there anything I can say to gain your cooperation in this? I'd really like to think we can get this taken care of. Get non-compliance there, that takes you to the act step. Then that's actions consistent with training. That might be reporting back to your supervisor. It might be issuing a stop work order. Whatever whatever is next in your world will be right there. That's a brief example of how we might work through a situation where someone is resistant in our attempts to get or generate voluntary compliance. And of course, we pair this with all the de-escalation techniques and things like that. I've condensed probably 3 hours right here into about 40 minutes or so. If you're interested, I'd encourage you to go online, verbaljudo.com. There's a whole lot more information about verbal judo. If you're interested in scheduling a course for your agency, feel free to email me. We are getting back into in-person training now. I've taught 3 in-person classes here in the last 2 months. So I'm happy to travel anywhere to teach. I really enjoy this because it works. In the 28 years I've worked for the state of Oklahoma, hands down, this is if not number one, it's in the top 2 classes I've ever been in, and it works. So get online, take a look at the Verbal Judo Institute or verbaljudo.com. Dr. Thompson does have a book online on Amazon, simply called Verbal Judo. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years back, but the book was published. The second edition was published right after his passing. But we got a few minutes left for question and answers, so I will turn it over to Christine as moderator. See if there's any questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Freeman. That was an awesome presentation. Some great information there. We do have a question in the chat, and if anybody does have any other questions, please feel free to put them in there. But this one is, do you think tone is the same with different age groups? Do you think everyone notices? Oh, and it just went off on me. So we'll go with that one. Do you think tone is the same with different age groups?
No. Well, tone itself is going to vary from person to person. There's influences of culture that affect tone, how it's projected, but there's also issues of how it's received. So there's not perfect uniformity. I could give you some generalizations about tone, for native English speakers, for example, but someone who's not a native English speaker, tone's going to vary some, both in, again, projection as well as reception. Good question.
Okay, great. If you have time to roll through the chat later on, there's some really great experiences that people have shared on the chat, and a lot of great tips on what they are actually using out in the field right now.
Great.
And a lot of kudos to you for this presentation. And a lot of people would like the full 3-hour course. Yes. Okay. So people would like to know how much is a class. I'm sure they can find that on your website there.
Yes, feel free to email me, Michael@verbaljudo.com, and I can send you out to more information about that, because it depends on whether it's a 1-day class or a 2-day class, and we actually do 3-day classes as well. So it depends on the length of the class.
Here's another question. What do you recommend for inspectors to keep the communication on the professional side and not make it personal to the establishment purveyor?
Again, number one thing is to remember it's showtime. I'm just an actor. I'm playing the role. I'm playing the role of professional. So remember, that person that you're dealing with is probably playing the role of amateur. In this grand play that we're in, there are various roles. I'm the professional, they're the amateur. So when they respond with emotional responses, with verbal attacks, that shouldn't surprise me, because they're the amateur. That's their script. My script, on the other hand, is verbal judo, professional language, and maintaining that perception. And then in terms of generating voluntary compliance, the 5-step kata itself, when you learn the language involved in that, which we didn't have time to get into, that in and of itself maintains that professional perspective, because you've literally got a script that you're following, and you can change it up depending on the context, but you're following that script. It keeps you from allowing the interaction to become personal.
Okay, great. Another question, does verbal judo work for negatively minded operators as well?
Yes. Yes, most definitely. And the power in that really comes into in the 5-step kata. Yeah. Because the power in verbal judo is not because Dr. Thompson created it or I'm anything special. Verbal judo works because it's based on basic human psychology. It takes and if you look at the 5-step kata, it takes the 3 Aristotelian forms of persuasion, ethos, pathos, and logos, and puts them into a concise paradigm that you can memorize and use every single time. So it's basic human psychology. That's why it works. Yes.
If you could please share your email address once again.
Yes. Michael@verbaljudo.com.
Okay.
And it will be at the end of the slide. You'll get a copy of the presentation, I believe, and that will be at the last slide. We'll have that information there as well.
Yes, this presentation can be found in the Files tab to the right of the chat on the Packable site. So, okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Freeman.
All right, thank you.
Excellent presentation. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving right along to our next presentation. We have 3, sorry. We have 3 presenters who will be speaking about health equity and cultural navigation during a salmonella outbreak at an Ethiopian food establishment. So first we have Brianna Patton, earned her Master of Public Health degree from Nova Southeastern University in 2016 and started her career in public health as an environmental health specialist in 2018 at a Colorado local health department. She has experience inspecting food establishments and child care centers from the regulatory side, as well as working with members of the public on foodborne illness complaints. She shifted roles at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, working as an epidemiologist providing disease control guidance to long-term care facilities experiencing outbreaks. In her current role as an integrated food safety center of excellence epidemiologist, she investigates outbreaks of foodborne and enteric diseases while also providing trainings to other public health professionals, developing outbreak investigation resources, and leading several other projects. And along with Brianna, we also have Robin Weber. and Robin is a cross-cutting outbreak epidemiologist at the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. She earned her Master of Public Health from Oregon State University in 2013 and has worked as a communicable disease epidemiologist since then at both the state and local levels, and enjoys the variety of diseases that her cross-cutting role allows her to be involved in. Most of her work involves responding to outbreaks of food, enteric, and waterborne diseases and assisting any of the disease program areas that have surges in cases or need assistance. She previously served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Paraguay from 2006 to 2010, which inspired her to go into epidemiology when an outbreak of yellow fever occurred and lines for vaccination wrapped 2 blocks around the local health post. And finally, we have Tavia Mirasal-Wolf. Sparked by a passion for improving health equity around the globe, Tavia earned her bachelor's and master's in public health and has worked on a variety of projects in the US and abroad, some of which include HIV/AIDS education, research on a Train the Trainer course for mental health awareness and support in rural Uganda, and safe water, sanitation, and hygiene practices in rural Cambodia. Tavia has been with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment since 2018 and joined the Newcomer Health Program as the Cultural Navigation Unit Supervisor in October of 2021. The Cultural Navigation Unit strives to engage navigators to provide culturally relevant support to public health teams in order to assist with responses and educational efforts. Ladies, if you would please turn on your cameras, unmute yourself when speaking, and share your screen. The floor is yours.
All right, can you hear us?
We can, and we see your slides as well.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. My name is Robin Weber. I'm the cross-cutting outbreak epidemiologist here at the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves so you know which of us is talking.
I'm Bree Patton, and I am the Food Safety Center of Excellence epidemiologist here at CDPHE. Hi, everyone. I'm Tavia Mirasal-Wolf, and I am the Cultural Navigation Unit Supervisor.
All right, so today we will be walking you through an investigation of an outbreak of Salmonella 14512I-, which is a mouthful. So it's also known as monophasic Salmonella typhimurium, that was associated with a traditional Ethiopian cuisine in Colorado in late 2021. Our objective is to not only explain the steps employed in this unique investigation, but to talk about how we utilized our Office of Health Equity's Cultural Navigation Program to solve and mitigate this outbreak. In mid-November of 2021, our laboratory here at CDPHE notified us of a new cluster of 5 cases of monophasic Salmonella typhimurium that were identified through whole genome sequencing. At first glance, those 5 cases were found to be highly related within 2 allele differences of one another. They all resided within 2 Denver metro area counties, and they had a median age of just 10 years old, and 100% identified as Black or African American. Onsets ranged from October 11th to October 31st. 80% came from households where ground beef was prepared or consumed either raw or undercooked as the traditional Ethiopian cuisine called kitfo. At this point, I wasn't familiar with kitfo, not being a consumer of kitfo myself, so I immediately reached out to our cultural navigation team in the Office of Health Equity to request a consultation with the cultural navigator who could explain to us what kitfo was and the cultural significance around it. The cultural navigator explained to us that it is a very common and traditional food made from ground beef, mixed with spices and butter, and is usually served raw or very lightly cooked and consumed oftentimes at room temperature. In understanding the cultural significance of the food and the relative ease in which it is prepared because it doesn't require a cook step, we were concerned about a potential increase in consumption during the upcoming holidays. Our cultural navigators explained to us that given its cultural significance, it would be likely to be consumed during traditional Ethiopian Orthodox Christmas on January 7th, just after the new year. So our outbreak investigation steps then commenced, piecing together the public health laboratory surveillance with routine and supplemental case interviews.
Hey, ladies, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we may have lost your sound. If everybody can hold on just for a moment, we'll try to get them back online with their audio.
Can you hear us now?
We can, yes. And we're seeing
Okay,
your presentation in, not in your presentation mode.
when did you stop hearing us? On this slide?
Right around there. Yes, it was that one or the next
Well-
one, yep.
Okay, so we'll start here. Sorry about that. And
That's
then
okay.
I'm gonna keep off my video because the audio is now on my personal computer. So just so you all know.
Thank you.
All right, Robin, take it away.
All right. So going back to that slide, our outbreak investigation steps then commenced, piecing together the public health laboratory surveillance with routine and supplemental case interviews, environmental assessments and traceback of markets, and a beef producer involved in this outbreak, and perhaps most significantly, community health education activities. So I cannot, next slide, please. Excellent. I cannot overstate how important whole genome sequencing and routine public health laboratory surveillance were in identifying this outbreak. It's possible that this outbreak could have gone unnoticed for several weeks if it weren't for whole genome sequencing linking these cases together. In all, we had 23 cases that were confirmed as part of this outbreak through whole genome sequencing, in which all isolates were between 0 and 3 alleles differences. 2 additional probable cases were identified either by PCR testing without whole genome sequencing or through epi linkage to a confirmed case. For a historical perspective, monophasic Salmonella typhimurium is a very common serotype that's associated with foodborne illness, and in the past, it has been linked to outbreaks involving pork and swine. All right, so routine interviews were conducted by local public health agencies and CDPHE's student enteric disease interviewer team. Supplemental questionnaires were created by CDPHE epidemiologists using REDCap, and all questionnaires were administered either by the local public health agencies or CDPHE's team of student interviewers. From these interviews, we discovered some interesting findings. All of the cases resided in those same 2 counties initially identified. All cases identified as either Black or African American or other race, and all were identified as part of the Ethiopian American community. Onsets occurred between October 11th to December 7th, and concerning notable exposures, 95% reported consuming, handling, or being exposed to rare or raw ground beef served as kitpo in the week prior to their illness onset. 90% of cases reported purchasing or someone else in the household purchasing ground beef from one of 6 Ethiopian markets in Metro Denver in the week preceding their illness. So one concerning outcome of this outbreak was that 1/5 of the cases ended up hospitalized. The median age was 20 years old, and nearly half of our cases, 44%, were children under the age of 18. More women were impacted by this outbreak than men, who accounted for 44% of our cases. We conducted a binomial probability analysis for this outbreak. We utilized the FoodNet FAST population survey to identify background rates of consumption, specifically for beef and lamb products, as those were the most frequent food items reportedly eaten by our cases. We selected race for our demographic group and compared our cases to the rates of all Black or African Americans for each food category we looked at. We found statistically significant consumption of raw or undercooked ground beef, which helped narrow our focus on beef exposures. Though most of the children did not report eating KIPO, many of them had household members who did, which led us to believe that cross-contamination in household food handling practices may have contributed to illness in the youngest cases.
So as previously mentioned, initial and supplemental interviews identified 6 Ethiopian markets in which raw ground beef was purchased by cases. So in December 2021, CDPHE epidemiologists and environmental health staff from our local health department visited 4 of the markets and performed some environmental assessments. And while we were there, multiple factors contributing to cross-contamination were observed, which ultimately can lead to those opportunities for pathogen survival and proliferation. But in general, meat grinders, cutting boards, and knives were not being cleaned and sanitized at the appropriate frequency or following the correct procedure. So in the first picture on this slide, you can see that knives were hanging from a magnetic knife strip that were still soiled with food particles and were being actively used. In the third picture on the slide, you can see there were open packages of beef being stored on a cloth fabric, which was allowing for continual contamination of any new beef products that were placed there afterwards. And then in addition, opened beef products were stored above multiple ready-to-eat foods in different refrigeration units throughout the facilities. Go back real quick, sorry. And finally, there were multiple instances of improper hand washing observed by food handlers working with the beef products. So as a result of the assessments, environmental health staff provided education on cleaning and sanitization, hand washing, and food storage. And a cleaning compliance agreement was actually issued for one of the markets that entailed additional follow-up by local public health so that we could ensure compliance.
Great. While performing the environmental assessments, we found out that these markets all use the same beef supplier, initiating traceback activities. Our local public health partners helped us get pictures of receipts showing that their beef came from the same distributor. After contacting that distributor, it was discovered that all beef products came from one Colorado beef processor. After contacting CDC and USDA FSIS for guidance, we learned that salmonella is not considered an adulterant on or in raw ground beef, as it is intended to be cooked to kill any pathogens. Furthermore, for any federal actions to be taken, regulatory action would also require better receipts and documentation. Unfortunately, with these Ethiopian markets being independently owned and fairly small, none of our cases had receipts, and the restaurants or the markets didn't have systems that provided those necessary details. For customers purchasing ground beef, whole cuts of denuded ground were ground on site per customer order. There was no regulation preventing retailers from grinding the meat on site, even if it's not the intended use by the beef producer. None of the cases had any beef available for testing, as it is usually kept fresh and consumed within a day or two by the consumer. So not being content to let our vulnerable Ethiopian American community continue to get sick, we explored our own public health authority to pursue traceback to the beef processor. This might be different in different states and depending on your jurisdiction, so it's worth reviewing with your legal consultants and attorneys. But here in Colorado, we have pretty broad authority to pursue an investigation of an outbreak in the interest of public health. We decided to use that authority to gain consent from each of those markets, as well as from the beef producer, to conduct environmental swabbing. And the best part is we didn't end up having to issue a single public health order to get that cooperation. We just asked really nicely, which is very important for us after 2 years of COVID pandemic.
So in early January, we visited the 6 markets named by our cases, and we conducted the environmental swabbing. So we really tried to swab multiple places throughout the facilities in search of salmonella. So this included floor drains, walk-in refrigerators, meat grinders, knife strips, door handles, carts, anywhere really any place that you could think of. But ultimately, we did not get a single swab at any of the markets that was positive for salmonella of any kind. And we do feel like this could be in part due to the inability to get out to the markets for swabbing in a timely manner, partially due to delayed whole genome sequencing results, as well as limitations due to COVID. But approximately a week later, we visited the beef production plant and swabbed there as well. Unfortunately, because of how the plant was set up, we did our swabbing during pre-production at the beginning of the day. So there was no beef processing actually taking place at the time we swabbed. But we did swab scales, shelving, production lines, fans, grates, and floor drains. And similar with the markets, nothing came back positive for salmonella. So while our epi investigation led us to the source, cross-contamination in homes definitely contributed to this outbreak. Several of our cases did not report actually consuming KIPFO, but noted that it was prepared by others in the home prior to them becoming ill. And as we know, eating raw or undercooked ground beef does present a huge risk factor for foodborne illness, but we did not feel it would be culturally appropriate to try to warn people to not consume an otherwise traditional cuisine. So to ensure cultural sensitivity, we did partner with our Colorado State University Extension Office. They are the true experts in foodborne illness prevention, education, and outreach. And we developed some materials surrounding KIPFO. So we created a flyer, and the focus of the flyer was to bring awareness to the risks associated with KIPFO consumption and offer recommendations on food safety while preparing or handling raw ground beef in the home. So the main areas that we focused on were hand washing, proper food storage within your refrigerator, cold holding temperatures, cleaning and sanitizing to prevent cross-contamination, and then if one does choose to cook their meat, how to properly cook it to the correct temperature to avoid foodborne illness. So this is the flyer that we created. I know it's a little bit hard to see on our slides, but this is the English version of the food safety flyers. As you can see, there are some pictures on it, which we felt really would help with the message that we were trying to promote. And then we also had the flyer translated into Amharic. And so here you can see it on the slide. So in order to ensure that we had the greatest impact within our community with these flyers, we connected with our cultural navigation team again to discuss effective places and methods to promote the information in a culturally appropriate way. So our cultural navigation team partners with community-based organizations who hire navigators from the community and organize culturally responsive community outreach and education campaigns. So our navigators are trusted members of their community, and they can provide both linguistic and cultural support during public health responses. So for this outbreak, the cultural navigators looked over our materials and provided edits to ensure our message would resonate well within the community. And then they were also able to connect us with community members and locations in which to disseminate the flyers. This consisted of 3 different clinics, 3 resettlement agencies, 4 Ethiopian churches, 1 mosque, 1 social services center, and a recreation center. And shortly after disseminating the materials into the community, one of the members of the cultural navigation team reached out to us, letting us know that the outreach we did was successful, as she had received several messages from people in the community sending her the flyer showing that they had seen it. And so in addition to the previous mentioned places where we distributed the flyers, we also provided laminated copies in both English and Amharic, and we hung them up for display near the front counters and meat cases in each of the 6 identified markets. And so when working with the markets for this outreach, several of the owners were concerned that these flyers were pointing them out as the cause of the outbreak and would result in a loss of business. So we really had to explain that the messaging was aimed towards members of the community and discuss food safety practices that could be applied in home environments. But one success that can be noted from this outreach and the relationships that we built with these markets over the course of this outbreak investigation is that when we returned to the markets a few weeks later, the flyers were still on display in their original locations in all 6 of the locations.
So throughout the entirety of this outbreak investigation, there were many challenges and limitations. The original cluster of cases was not identified until almost a month after the first illness onsets due to the lag in receiving whole genome sequencing results. It just takes time to do that sequencing in the lab. Furthermore, we were working this outbreak during the holiday season, and COVID-19 was no help either, as our ability to swab was delayed due to the Omicron surge. We were also hampered by the lack of receipts, which meant that USDA, FSIS had their hands tied and couldn't really get involved. So it took additional time consulting with our own department attorneys to figure out what we could do from a legal standpoint to continue this investigation.
But on the other side of that, though, one of the biggest successes of this outbreak investigation comes from the health education campaign that we implemented. We were working with a historically marginalized population that is more vulnerable to poor health outcomes from enteric diseases, but we knew that our response needed to be culturally sensitive to tradition, and simply saying fully cook your kitfo wasn't going to resonate well. So the outreach resulted in increased awareness to food safety. It allowed people to feel empowered to participate in traditional customs and cuisines while minimizing the risks of foodborne illness within their households. And then another success of this outbreak investigation was the reaffirmation of our authority at the state level to conduct the investigative activities we needed to in order to try to solve this outbreak, even without the participation of our federal partners. And lastly, we were hugely successful in working with numerous community health partners from 3 different local public health agencies, CSU's Extension Office, our own cultural navigators, the State Public Health Laboratory, and environmental health partners, really showcasing success of this investigation through collaboration of all parties involved. And so just real quick to wrap it up, we just want to acknowledge and thank the various partners that did play a role in this outbreak investigation. We really couldn't have had the impact that we did without the contributions of everyone involved. And so now I want to hand it over to Tavia to discuss cultural navigation.
Thank you. So I'm Tavia Maris-Wolf, and I'm the Cultural Navigation Unit Supervisor at CDPHE. So I'll just be talking to you a little bit more about cultural navigation. And just to give an overview, I'll provide some information about navigation in general, as I don't know if everybody on this call is familiar with navigation. I'll provide some history about navigation at CDPHE, some information about the key role of our unit, some activity highlights, and then the process of establishing a cultural navigation program, and then move on to key considerations, funding and structure for our program, and then a vision moving forward. So those of you who might not be familiar with navigation, navigation has actually been around for years and years and years, and really was initially established in the clinical system with patient navigators. So it started with cancer care, and what patient navigators really do are to work with patients to help them figure out how to navigate the clinical system. So to really connect them with the care that they need and different resources that they might need as well. And then community health workers have also been around for several years as well. And so community health workers are individuals who work within the community and usually do work on public health matters. But both patient navigators and community health workers are a little bit different from cultural navigators. So I am going to go ahead and read the definition for cultural navigators. So cultural navigators are community partners who serve as trusted and confidential sources of information between community members and public health. Cultural navigators are deeply rooted in their communities and are often community members themselves. They are uniquely positioned to bridge cultural and linguistic knowledge gaps for health departments, and they often are culturally congruent with the populations that they serve. So as far as we know, the term cultural navigator had not existed or been used before our program was actually established in response to COVID-19. And then it's also, I think it's also really important to mention that cultural navigation has really been going on in communities for a long time, but hasn't necessarily been recognized. So it's really great that we are bringing some credibility to individuals that have normally been working on a volunteer basis. So the key role of our unit is to support culturally relevant public health responses and initiatives through engaging navigators to be part of a public health team with the goal of bridging, being a bridge to promote trust. So just to provide a little bit of information on why cultural navigation was actually established at CDPHE, early surveillance of case interview data showed that there were disparities in newcomer populations in terms of the individuals who were receiving initial CICT calls and those that were completing those calls. So that was compared to the general population. So it really highlighted the unmet need to support our populations and also our public health partners. And then I just wanted to outline a little bit about our priority population. So the initial data that we did for COVID-19 was for individuals who receive an ORR status or Office of Refugee Resettlement status. However, all of our interventions and our program really benefits anyone, including immigrants and migrants who may have cultural barriers. So again, after seeing the disparities in the data, we really saw a need to support so that individuals who fall into our priority populations could receive the same public health outreach as the general public, and that we could really help to increase health equity and also receive data on these populations that have been historically left out of public health responses. So over the past 2.5 years, navigation has really taken many different shapes and sizes, which honestly have been established through trial and error. This work again began through supporting COVID response, more specifically data collection through contact investigation and contact tracing, but it's really been blossoming into so much more than that. And then over the next few slides, I'll discuss how cultural navigation was established, how it's been maintained. I'll give you some specific examples of how navigators have been engaged in public health responses outside of COVID, and through communication campaigns. So how we really engage navigators are we partner with community-based organizations who organize culturally responsive community outreach and education at community events. And then they also assist with public health campaigns through the engagement of navigators. So our unit specifically coordinates navigators to be on COVID-19 contact investigation and contact tracing calls through phone outreach. We also coordinate navigators to be at community testing events and provide outbreak support. And then a lot of what Bree talked about, we also coordinate navigators to assist public health in reviewing messaging and providing outreach strategies. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the work that we've done with COVID-19, just because, again, it's really where the program was established initially. And then I'll move into some highlights of other areas where navigation has been utilized. So I know that this graphic is really small, but I just wanted to highlight that a cultural navigator has a very distinct role, which is different from, obviously different from the case. It's different from the investigator, different from an interpreter, and then also different from a resource navigator. So as I kind of mentioned before, a cultural navigator provides much more than word for word interpretation. And so they can really help public health understand where there might be a barrier in getting information across from the case or getting information from the case. So you can really engage navigators in a lot of different ways, just depending on what your public health goals are and how you decide to partner with that navigator. So specifically with COVID-19 CICT efforts, Our navigators sometimes would provide pre-calls to our cases to let them know why public health was reaching out to them, and then give a warm handoff to the investigator. Sometimes our navigators would stay on the phone with the investigator to help navigate some of those cultural differences that might arise, or answer questions in culturally sensitive manners. And then sometimes our navigators would actually follow up. So if public health was having a hard time reaching the case, then they would call the case. Or if public health did reach a case but was not able to get all of the information or data that they needed, our navigators would reach out and try to fill in the gaps. So now I'm just going to go through a couple of activity highlights. So this specific activity highlight is related to COVID-19, and it was with humanitarian crisis response, where many individuals were living in a congregate setting. So in this setting, our navigators were present in person, as well as our public health teams were present in person. And so they really assisted with ongoing testing, as well as testing for individuals who were close contacts of somebody who tested positive. And this was really successful because they were able to actually go to rooms and knock on doors and say, hey, you know, we're recommending that you get tested, and here's why. And they were able to do that messaging a lot better than we could on the public health side. And then they also helped with in-person interviews, as well as traditional interviews for anybody who tested positive for COVID-19. They also assisted with COVID-19 education, which was really bi or tri-directional. So from our priority population to our navigators to our public health team, we really all learned a lot from each other. And so again, being in person for this was really beneficial. And then our navigators also helped with vaccination efforts, and just really providing a warm handoff between the education and the testing efforts that were going on and the vaccination clinics that were happening out at the housing facility. Another success that we had was having our navigators attend a COVID-19 vaccination event. So this was actually at a meat packing plant where there was an outbreak of COVID-19. And so ongoing vaccination was happening, and individuals who declined to be vaccinated were kind of, they were asked to go into this room where our navigators were, and our navigators just talked to those individuals about, you know, if they didn't want to get vaccinated, why not? And just ask them if they had any questions and different things like that. And it was estimated that about 10% of individuals did decide to get vaccinated after talking with our navigators. And there was really great warm handoff between our navigators to our we had some clinicians there that could answer more in-depth questions to our public health team. So it was a really successful event, just really showing how navigators can be engaged as part of the team. And then we have a lot of activity highlights, and I'm not going to go through all of them now, but this will be my last one. So this is in regards to a typhoid investigation that occurred. And what ultimately ended up happening was that a local public health agency reached out to a family to do a case investigation for somebody who tested positive with typhoid. And in the initial interview, the case did not indicate that they had international travel. However, they reached out to our navigation team. We were able to connect them with a navigator to assist with that investigation. And upon the second interview, they did find that there was a risk factor for international travel. And so I'll just read the quote here. By bringing on Sulfa as a cultural navigator, we were able to better meet the needs of this family, which I'm very thankful for. Sulfa's ability to build rapport with the family has allowed for quality communication and effective exchange of information between all parties involved. And at this point, it was CDPHE and LPJ and Sulfa's family, which is really the key to disease control. So a big thanks to Sulfa. Okay, So now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the actual process for developing cultural navigation initiatives. I do want to really caveat this by saying that these steps are not necessarily linear. Some of these steps could be happening simultaneously, and that our Center of Excellence in Newcomer Health is working to formalize the best practices and toolkits for cultural navigation in the public health setting. However, I do think that many of these points will be relevant if you yourself are looking to establish a cultural navigation program within your entity. So first, of course, it's important to define the need for cultural navigation. In our case, we define this through data analysis. Second, to understand how cultural navigators can be engaged to address the need. So begin to work with stakeholders to better understand, again, how navigators can actually address the need. And then third, consider training and capacity development opportunities for navigators related to the topical area. So again, our team started with training specific to COVID and the contact investigation contact training process. However, we're looking into further capacity building opportunities that will focus more on public health topics. And then fourth, establish funding and contracting and consider contracting considerations. So in my experience, this can get a little bit tricky. We did a lot of footwork to better understand the advantages and disadvantages of hiring navigators versus contracting with community-based organizations, which I'll talk a little bit more about in further slides. Additionally, as you likely know, a lot of funding sources, particularly funding sources, can have limited allowability and can be restrictive when it comes to whole health concerns, whole health support, or responding to concerns that might surface during a public health investigation. And then this is the exciting part. So once you've done the steps prior to this, you get to actually launch your efforts in the community or in the response that you're looking at. And then it's important to just really evaluate your model and your efforts to see if any pivots need to occur or if you need to redefine or refine your model. So there's some important considerations when establishing a cultural navigation program. Collaboration is key, compromise is expected, and expectations should be jointly developed. So it's really important to work preemptively to understand each program's metrics and pressures and how these can actually affect outcomes. So for example, with our COVID response in Colorado, some of the metrics were actually coming from the governor, which was much higher than our program. So there were metrics in terms of, how many people need to be outreached per day, et cetera, et cetera. So that was actually very much out of our hands internally. However, we did work together to figure out a process for engaging navigators, even though in the short term, those case investigations could have been a little bit slower to happen. However, in the long term, it really did benefit the communities who received navigation support and benefited our public health teams in general. So again, it's important to just consider all of those long-term and short-term trade-offs that can occur. And then of course, it's extremely important to build trust with the case and or community from the very beginning. So again, engaging a navigator, it will take a little bit more time from the very beginning. However, you're going to really see the outcomes of that be much better because you're building trust from the very beginning instead of, really breaking down that trust and then having to go back and try to rebuild it. Okay, so a little bit about our funding and structure. I mentioned a little bit about, I think you probably all know funding can be a little bit restrictive. So this is definitely something to consider when you're establishing a cultural navigation program. So the funding that we had was from the Center of Excellence in Newcomer Health, and we initially used this funding to pilot Colorado initiatives, and then we're currently using this funding for efforts that will benefit a national audience. rather than to sustain ongoing Colorado efforts. And then we also have ELC COVID-19 funding. So the majority of our current activities are very focused on COVID-19 with some very limited allowability for other ELC covered conditions. But this really is a very limited scope as compared to what we would like to see happen in the future. And then in terms of our structure, we partner and contract with 5 community-based organizations who then either hire navigators or subcontract with navigators. There's a lot of pros and cons to this approach. Some of the pros are that the navigators themselves are not actually employed by a government agency, which our communities have indicated that there might not be as much trust there if navigators are employed by a government agency. And community-based organizations in general are also just really connected to their communities, so they know who are trusted leaders within their communities. Of course, there's some cons to this approach as well. In terms of contracting, this can get a little bit tricky and be time consuming. And then you don't have quite as much say in terms of the specific capacity building that occurs and different things like that. And then just a little bit about additional initiatives that are occurring right now. So I mentioned briefly that we are really working to establish toolkits and other resources that can help guide other entities as they're establishing a navigation program as it relates to public health. And then we're also working a lot on specific trainings and competencies for navigators who will be working in public health. So once we get those off the ground, they will be shared through our Colorado Center of Excellence in Newcomer Health. And then we're also looking at evaluation. Data has historically been lacking from initiatives such as these, which can make it really difficult to advocate for evidence-based strategies. So we're looking at the data that's been collected, and we're looking into the future to have some really concrete evaluation. And then looking, towards sustainability of this program. And then, as I mentioned before, really our vision is to eventually have a navigation program that can help support whole health support. There's a lot that we hear from the community, when navigators are doing outreach in the community, and then also those one-on-one case investigations. And we really want to be able to effectively connect our community members with the resources that they need, as well as education and everything that they really need. So we're really looking forward to sustainability and whole health support. So that wraps up my portion of the presentation, and I think we've got time for questions.
Okay, great, ladies. Brianna, Robin, and Tavia, my apologies for the mispronunciation in your introduction. That was a great presentation. Some really great work being done out in Colorado. We do have some questions in the chat, if you don't mind. The first one is, how were you able to require each establishment to post the flyers?
We didn't necessarily require it. A lot of that came from just the continual presence from the initial assessments, the swabbing, and just building rapport with our markets on why this was necessary, why it was important for their community. And honestly, we just asked them if they'd be willing to, and every single one of them was willing to. And like I said, we went back, I think 4 weeks later, and they all still had them posted. So, I mean, I guess it was just the rapport building throughout the entire investigation.
Nice. Somebody is interested in knowing, how many cultural navigators do you have in your department?
So our cultural navigators are either hired or subcontracted through community-based organizations. So currently we have the capacity to support, I believe it's 19 different languages. So some of our navigators are multilingual as well, but we have much more than 19 navigators. And I don't actually know the specific number that we have, but again, they're not actually employed through CDPHE. They're employed through the community-based organizations who we contract with.
Great, great. Next question, are you aware of any other typical Ethiopian foods that we should be aware of that may pose a greater risk?
There's a couple of food items that were kind of brought to our attention that potentially are consumed raw. Another one is called lamb tibs, and it's specifically prepared with lamb meat that isn't necessarily fully cooked, and sometimes it's consumed raw. I think to a certain extent, it's going to depend on the particular preference of the individual, but those are kind of the ketfo and the tibs are kind of the two most common ones that we've heard about.
And as we kind of discussed in the presentation, the cross-contamination within homes was one of the biggest factors, because we did have a lot of children who became ill who didn't actually consume these food items. And so, we definitely know that there were a lot more people who became sick as a result of these food items, but really protecting our vulnerable populations plays a big piece in it.
True. Next question, have you developed any cultural navigation for native populations within the state?
That's a really good question. It's actually, I believe that that's something that's being worked on through one of the universities here. However, I don't have a lot of information on that.
Okay. You have a lot of kudos, a lot of thank yous, great information in the chat. Yeah, I want to thank you ladies for taking the time today to present here. It was a great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so that takes us to our break time for today. We are going to take a break until 3 p.m. What I ask you to do is to leave this session, and when you come back at 3 o'clock or prior to 3, please log in to the next session card on the agenda, and that will take you to the session for the remainder of the afternoon. Okay, all right, have a great break, everybody. We'll start at 3. Thank you.